food banks, shuttered stores, canceled flights. These are just some examples of how the coronavirus has hit the U.S. economy. And now there's a debate over whether states can safely reopen. So how exactly did we get here? Let's start in mid-April, when protests against stay-at-home orders begin cropping up in Michigan, Ohio, and North Carolina. By April 16th, U.S. coronavirus cases surpassed 600,000, and over 22 million people filed for unemployment. The next day, anti-lockdown protests ramp up again, this time with President Trump tweeting to, quote, liberate Virginia, Michigan, and Minnesota. Into that weekend, Florida reopens some beaches with social distancing guidelines, despite an uptick in cases. During the week of April 20th, South Carolina, Oklahoma, and Georgia allow some non-essential businesses to start taking customers. And on April 24th, Tennessee's governor outlines how some businesses can get back to business, but adds the state won't enforce reopening guidelines.
The community itself will enforce them.
At this point, U.S. coronavirus cases top 1 million, and Florida's governor says the state will lift its stay-at-home order for most counties.
What is our biggest obstacle? Fear. Fear of the unknown. Fear sparked by constant doom and gloom and hysteria that has permeated our culture for the last 6 weeks.
By April 30th, the U.S. sees 30 million job losses and faces its deadliest 24 hours to date,
with more than 2,900 lives lost to COVID-19.
With some parts of the country harder hit than others. For example, New York State saw roughly 1 death for every 1,000 people. But for states like Georgia and Washington, deaths were closer to 1 in every 10,000. Meanwhile, protesters storm Michigan's capital, and Georgia lets most of its shelter-in-place orders expire at midnight.
Tonight at 11:59 p.m., the statewide shelter-in-place order for most Georgians will expire.
As we enter May, states like Washington, Michigan, and Pennsylvania extend stay-at-home orders, and the tri-state area closes schools through the rest of the academic year. And further south, Mississippi decides not to ease restrictions after seeing an increase in cases and deaths.
We are not out of the woods yet.
Though it relaxed guidelines a week later.
Shutdowns for weeks and weeks and months on end are not sustainable.
In the meantime, at least 10 states see anti-lockdown protests.
It's devastatingly worrisome to me personally.
Florida also closes a park in Miami Beach after thousands were issued warnings over not wearing face masks. More than half of U.S. states partially reopen by May 4th. The same day, a draft interagency report is published by the New York Times,
predicting by June 1st, the daily death toll from the coronavirus could nearly double to 3,000.
On May 5th, a Texas salon owner is sent to jail after operating her business during the state's lockdown.
I don't think the government should dictate what we do. No, we're adults. We can take care of ourselves.
And Trump reaffirms it's time for the U.S. to reopen, despite fears of another surge.
That lives will be lost to reopen the country?
It's possible there will be some, because you won't be locked into an apartment or a house or whatever it is.
Lines for food banks grow across the country as some start rejecting face mask guidelines. During the week of May 11th, states like New Hampshire, Ohio, and Mississippi start reopening stores. Meanwhile, White House task force member Anthony Fauci gives this warning.
There is a real risk that you will trigger an outbreak that you may not be able to control, which in fact could even set you back on the road to trying to get economic recovery.
And people flock to bars in Wisconsin after their Supreme Court strikes down the state's stay-at-home order. Although most of the country has partially reopened, it's too soon to tell how these changes will impact the number of coronavirus cases. We'll be monitoring the progression of this virus as the country continues to reopen.
As the weather warms up, more people are heading outside to exercise, but is it safe to work out without a mask? NBC News technology correspondent Jacob Ward takes a look.
Wondering whether it's okay to run, bike, or hike without a mask? Well, here's the deal. Surgical masks don't protect you from others, they protect others from you. But the good news is, the more people that wear them, the more effective we can all be at slowing the spread. Jay Jamali is an expert in protective gear from N95s all the way up to hazmat suits.
Wear a face covering. It multiplies the effectiveness. If I wear it and you wear it at the same time, the chances of one of us giving it to the other is really low.
But wearing the technically correct mask carries its own challenges.
I challenge you to find someone in the summertime who can keep an N95 mask on for a long period of time.
Dr. Chin Hong says N95s have practical drawbacks, like drawing your hands to your face.
It smells bad, it's uncomfortable, you feel you're suffocating in there, and then people will be manipulating it because they feel uncomfortable.
Right, so wear what is comfortable, but make sure you're wearing something.
Yeah, and just leave it alone, and if you're comfortable, go for it. Like this mask that I wear in the hospital, I love it. It doesn't smell bad. I can keep it on all day, actually, and I've gotten used to it. These are the masks when you look at Asia. These are the masks that people are wearing on the street as well, and you can wear it because it's comfortable.
And you have yourself cloth face covering.
Of course, officially, the CDC recommends not wearing N95s because those are considered critical supplies to be reserved for healthcare workers. Is it all right to go without a mask sometimes? Well, in Hong Kong, where masks have been universally required, there's an exception to the policy.
The one place where, according to their public health group, they allow people to be a little bit more lax about their masks is in the park setting where you're further away from someone. If you really need to spend time with people and you had a choice, stay socially distant outside versus then going to somebody's house.
And even Jay Jamali says you can bend the rules sometimes.
Let's say I'm going to go for a walk, okay, and I'm out there and there's nobody around. Do I need a mask? No. If I go with my immediate household, my 3 sons, my wife, we're going out together, the answer is no.
If I'm going out for a run and I know that no one else is going to be around, well, okay, maybe I can get away with not wearing a mask. But how often are you actually alone in this world? And experts say that to, actually stay safe, we should all be wearing these. In the end, the lesson is simple to remember. Don't be stupid, wear a mask.
There you go. I like that. I'm going to make a banner out of that.
It's a big question. Will we ever shake hands again? Here's a look back at the history of the traditional greeting and whether the ways we say hello will survive this pandemic.
Fist bump, la bise, dap, high five, hug, handshake. The way we greet one another differs slightly from culture to culture, but humans the world over use some form of physical greeting ritual to say hello, or at least we did.
In a matter of weeks, across the world, social norms that have been in existence, as far back as we can go, are taken from us, and it is a strange, uncomfortable feeling.
While the handshake has become near universal, greeting rituals go back, way back.
Using the written sources, we can go back to the writings of Homer, for instance, so the 8th century BC, ancient Greece, and there he refers to people using the handshake to pledge allegiance.
Artwork across the ancient world depicts the act of shaking hands. In ancient Greece, they devoted an entire art form to depicting it. They called it dexiosis, which translates to giving someone the right hand.
More commonly, it's understood at times that we use the handshake ritual began in medieval Europe between knights, and they used it to show that they weren't armed.
That's where most people think the handshake came from. Knights shook hands to prove they didn't have a sword in their hand or dagger up their sleeve. In America, the practice gained widespread popularity from the Quakers of the 18th century. Historian Michael Zuckerman writes that Quakers put the practice of the handshake extended to everyone, regardless of station, as we do still. But this greeting instinct probably predates these examples by a few 100,000 years.
Greetings have been around ever since human beings have been around, and beyond that, and our earlier ancestors too, chimpanzees and other primates. And looking at them, you see that they also have rituals that they use when they meet each other, when they reconnect. Some people will look at uncontacted tribes, for instance, deep in the Amazon, and there's evidence that they use the handshake. And again, this suggests that it's not just a kind of a new recent cultural invention, but actually actually it's something deep in our evolutionary history. You know, we sometimes just view it as a polite thing to do, but actually I still think it does signal that intention to cooperate rather than compete with each other.
Unfortunately, being that history has a pesky tendency to repeat itself, this is by no means the first time disease has changed our rituals.
So going back to the 1st century AD, Roman Emperor Tiberius, he issued a decree banning lip kissing, believing that this was responsible for spreading a fungoid disease, which was disfiguring the nobles. Believe it or not, the English were actually renowned for their kissing and then their intimate greeting rituals. During the plague in England, during the sort of 1660s, you saw the decline of kissing. And then more recently, there was the H1N1 swine flu in 2009, and you know there people were told to stop the physical rituals. Even in France, people asked to stop la bise, the kiss, the cheek-to-cheek kiss. During the Ebola outbreak in 2014, people were asked to stop shaking hands.
So what happens when we can't really signal that cooperation anymore, especially for an extended period of time? And knowing what we know about how disease spreads, do we need to rethink how we say hello?
But the truth is, right now, I guess none of us really know, and we're making things up as we go, and yet to see which behaviors come out on top. We can look back in history and see that we've come through certain, epidemics before, and we've reverted back to our old behaviors. We're still primed to be social beings, and we're still going to find ways to greet each other and acknowledge each other and show that we have these good intentions towards each other.
Hey, NBC News fans, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down here and click on any of the videos over here to watch the latest interviews, show highlights, and digital exclusives. Thanks for watching.